Welcome back, dear students. Have you put on your thinking caps? Are you ready to stretch your brains? Get a notepad because we're going to go through the various fees and expenses and share classes, oh my, for mutual funds. Because most everybody who invests in mutual funds knows that they're being charged for their services. People don't work for free. However, they don't really understand it very well. Some do, but most don't. And since you are going to be the expert for your family and friends and coworkers, right, you need to understand these. And I'm going to ask you on the exam. So get ready. Buckle up, sit tight, because here we go. Slide 21. Every mutual fund, well, every investment actually, has annual operating expenses charged yearly against the fund's assets. And by far, normally the highest one is the management fees. Anywhere from 25 cents for every $100 up to $2 for every $100. That's what 0.25% to 2% means. It's based on the percentage of the fund's asset value, and this is paid to the people with the top hats, the portfolio managers, portfolio counselors, the research analysts, the securities analysts. They go by various names. But they're the people who go knocking on the doors of the various companies and looking at their competitors and their suppliers and their customers and their markets and their, So, there's a lot of work to be done, folks. If you do it correctly, it's a grand undertaking because the world is global. So you want an investment company with a global research organization at their disposal. In my humble opinion, there's some mutual fund companies where somebody's sitting in an office somewhere on the 23rd floor and making decisions about investments all around the world, and who knows, they might do a good job. They probably won't, but that's up to them. And up to you as an investor whether you want to invest in somebody like that. The next group are called 12B1 fees. What a great name. Huh? Dumb. These things are fees to defray advertising, servicing, and distribution costs of the fund. And they can be up to 1% per year. So they didn't start out that high, but there's a reason why they have grown to up to 1% of the fund, and we will see that as we continue. Then every fund has accounting and other expenses, the website, the lights, the rent, the janitors, all the paperwork and all that stuff that has to be taken care of, plus dealing with all the transactions and the buy and sell orders and the like. But it's usually not that much. Then I have a line here on slide 21 that you may, what's that? Well, some mutual funds are placed inside retirement accounts, such as Roth IRAs or 401ks. And for them, there's typically, but not always, a trustee fee, which is usually about $10, although I've seen it as high as $30 per year. So if you have a regular account that's outside of what the IRS calls a tax-qualified account, then you don't pay this fee. Because if you have a Roth IRA, for example, or a traditional IRA, you are not allowed to actually hold on to the money. A trustee must hold on to the money on your behalf. And, they got to get paid too. So it's usually about $10. Often nowadays, they don't even tell you. It's buried somewhere in the fine print, and they just take the $10 out of your account. But you can actually pay for it outside of the retirement account. You can send them a check to the trustee, and they won't take the money out of your account. Now, slide 22, trading costs. Well, all the annual expenses that we saw on the previous slide are disclosed in the annual prospectus, but trading costs aren't. So how does an investor know how much the trading costs are? Well, you can ask the mutual fund. They probably won't know. They'll have to go find somebody. Hey, this guy asked us how much the trading. Who knows that? Oh, you got to go talk to Fred over in the other building somewhere. We don't know that. So you can ask them. But better yet, just look at the annual turnover, because that's a measure of how much trading a mutual fund does. It's measured in percentage of the amount a portfolio turns over each year. So, for example, if a mutual fund has 100% turnover, that means within a year they will have bought and sold all the stocks or bonds or whatever securities they're investing in. 50% turnover, which means half of the portfolio will be turned over in a year, so it'll take 2 years for the portfolio to be completely turned over. I like mutual funds, stock mutual funds that is, bond mutual funds, that have about a 20-25% turnover. That means every 4 or 5 years. And why? Well, we'll discuss this later on when we get to valuation. Because 3, 4, 5 years is about all you really can look into the future. Even that is difficult, because you never know when the next recession is going to hit. But some mutual funds have 200% turnover. And to me, that's just ridiculous. That means they're not investing. That means they're speculating. That means they're renting the stock for 6 months, 3 months, 9 months. That's not investing. Now, when you look at a money market mutual fund, you'll see turnovers of 300 or 400% or less, 200%. And you say, wait a minute, what's going on? Well, remember, right, exactly. Commercial paper and treasury bills mature in 3, 6, 9 months. So they're always turning over the account. But that's just because they're short-term investments. They only last for a few months. So a high turnover in a money market account is nothing to be worried about, nothing to concern yourself about. It just comes with the territory. But a high turnover in a stock or a bond mutual fund, that to me is a red flag. That is something that I don't like to see. But others might say, no, I want that aggressive style of investing. Good luck. Now, slide 23. The eternal debate, the endless eternal debate. Load versus no load. Before 1960s and 70s, mostly 70s, most all funds were load funds. They were sold via brokers who were paid a commission, and that was how the financial representative and the fund's distributor, along with the financial representative's brokerage company that he or she worked for, mostly he's back then, that's how they got paid. Well, along came companies that decided they were going to bypass the brokers, and they created no-load funds. These are funds that do not charge a commission when shares are bought. They're traditionally, but now there's a way for brokers to get on the act because they don't like being left behind. They were traditionally sold directly to shareholders. And you will hear people say, you should never buy a no-load fund. You should never buy a load fund. Always go with a no-load fund. Well, that doesn't mean it's going to be less fees over time, fewer fees over time, especially if that no-load fund has high annual operating expenses. In my humble opinion, that's what you should be looking at in terms of costs. If you need the help of a financial representative or the funds that you want happen to be load funds, then you pay the load and you're done with it. But there are people who are adamantly opposed to that. Normally, I would rather not pay a commission, but if I needed the help of a financial representative or the funds I wanted were only sold through financial representatives, well, then so be it. Now, we're going to see, as we go through the presentation, some of the current debate that's going on right now in the financial world regarding how mutual funds charge their clients and how representatives charge their clients. with regard to the Department of Labor's fiduciary rule. It's truly a mess, folks, but it's what's going on right now. So we'll throw that into the mix, and we may create something on the website separate to that, because yours truly has his own opinion from being on the inside looking out. So let's go to slide 24. And now, this is where you're going to start stretching your brain, because this is where it gets tricky here. Get on a piece of paper and write down Class A. But then some people call them Class 1, but Class A is mostly what you hear. That's the front-end load. The commission is paid when the shares are purchased. They normally have lower annual operating expenses in perpetuity. Now, before the 1960s or so, these were the only mutual funds out there. You went to your broker and you bought the mutual fund through the broker, and you paid a commission, front-end load. But people, they get a little upset when they have to pay out money up front. So the industry created Class B, back-end load. And you're starting to see these things disappear. One by one, companies are saying we don't like these Class B. And there's a reason for that. They've been misused in some situations. But the commission is paid when the shares are redeemed. And you might say, well, wait a minute. What difference does it make whether you charge me up front or charge me when you take the money out? Well, relax. Just sit back. Most all Class B back-end load have what is called a contingent deferred sales charge. Isn't that a great name? I love the word contingent. Say it. Say contingent. Feels good. Feels good in your throat. A contingent deferred sales charge declines to zero over a period of 3 to 6 years. It might be the 5% the first year, and then 4%, 3, 2, 1, and after 5, 6 years, or 4, sometimes 4, 3, 2, 1, you don't pay any back-end load. Okay, all right, that makes sense. However, most back-end load funds pay higher annual operating expenses, courtesy of the 12B1 fees, until the contingent deferred sales charge declines to zero, and then eventually most all Class B shares will revert to the Class A shares, meaning that you will get the lower annual operating expenses. Are you confused yet? Good. We've done our job. I know. Stick with us. Stick with us. It'll start to make more sense when we start to look at we can start to look at specific mutual funds and how they charge their clients. Slide number 25, we have Class C shares. Excuse me. The Class C shares used to be called no-load funds, specifically broker no-load funds. There was no front-end charge and no back-end charge. No front-end commission, no back-end commission. If you redeemed the funds within a first year, they would hit you with a 1% or so back-end charge. Well, you're not supposed to do that. It's a mutual fund. You're supposed to hang on to it for several years. However, many Class C shares have higher annual operating expenses in perpetuity. Like that word, I love perpetuity. It means forever. Or for a long time, 10 years. There are those 12B1 fees again. They sneak in the 12B1 fees, and that's how they pay for the load over time. Hence, they can wind up costing you more than the Class A or the Class B shares over time. And now the Securities and Exchange Commission said, no. You can't call these Class C shares no load anymore. You have to call them a load fund, even though the load is spread out over 10 years or 8 years or forever. So Class C shares are not allowed to be called no-load funds, even though, I shouldn't say many, but some in the industry still think of them as broker no-load funds. Now you're really confused, right? Okay, good. We've done our job. Okay, slide number 26. So now we move into the no-load world. For the brokers, because, brokers don't like the fact that they're not going to get paid. They want to sell these no-load funds so they can tell people, hey, these are no-load funds, but we're still going to get paid. They have the advisor no-load funds, Class F, Class I, Class F for financial advisor, Class I for investment advisor, sometimes Class FI for financial investment advisor. These are held in what is often called a wrap account or a management account. Wealth management. We're not your broker. No, 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 no. We're your wealth manager. And we charge an extra 1 or 2% per year to manage the account, even though we don't do a darn thing except send you a bottle of wine on your birthday and take you to the steakhouse or golfing every once in a while. And that's what, I got to tell you folks, I was at a meeting with brokers and we were all talking and I was saying, I don't really like this wealth management account, these wrap accounts. The people are going to wind up spending far more over time. It'll make me wealthier. And this one guy looked at me and said, what are you worried about? You send them a bottle of wine on their birthday, you take them to the golf course every once in a while. They love you. And I thought, okay, it doesn't really address the issue that they're paying more for their, say, whatever. And this is where the Department of Labor fiduciary rule will come in as we say, hang on, hold your horses. And then lastly, we have what are called the true no-load funds. Well, that's not a legal term. That's what the financial media, the talking heads on TV say. Oh, you should never buy a load fund, even if it's a no-load fund inside a wrap account. You should only buy true no-load funds because these mutual funds deal directly with the public. They may not have a 12B1 fee that's greater than 0.25%. They're the darlings of the popular media. Bypass the middleman. Who needs a financial advisor? Just buy my book or watch my show or whatever. But that doesn't mean that the overall fees are low, folks. Over time, a no-load fund can wind up costing you more than a load fund because of the annual operating expenses. Exactly. So we're going to now look at some examples. Are you ready? Okay, so you've written all these different types of share classes down because we're going to come back to you and ask you about them. All right, so here is a mutual fund. Now, these are not, folks, there are more class shares. We're just looking at the main ones because these 4 different class shares that we've looked at, we're going to look at, are basically, they're typical of the many different types that you'll see. This is called the AB Large Cap Growth Fund. AB. Well, that's what Alliance has become. AB. It was Alliance, and then they got tarred and feathered because of 2 people. Remember back in the first presentation? 2 people inside the company, a large company, by the way, doing nasty, tricky little unethical things. So now it's called AB. Well, the AB stands for Alliance Bernstein. They got together with Samuel Bernstein Company or something like that. Now it's called AB. Figured that way. But they're a very good company, folks. Look at this. This is the Large Cap Growth Fund. They have an upfront fee of 4.25%. So that means if you paid $100, you invested $100, to $4.25 would come out of that. And that goes, some of it goes to the broker, some of it goes to Alliance Bernstein, to AB, some of it goes to mutual fund, but most of it goes to the brokerage firm, and then the brokerage firm gives much of it to the broker because that's how the broker gets paid. They're brokers. They get paid by commission. And we'll discuss that more in detail in Chapter 5 when we talk about how brokers and dealers make their money. But that's just the upfront fee. Now we have the annual operating expenses. Management fees of 0.74%. 0.74%. What does that mean? That means every year in perpetuity, forever. I love saying perpetuity because you get to spit on your friends when you say it. Perpetuity. you will be paying 74 cents for every $100 that's in the account. That's what 0.74% means. And people see these numbers and they really don't understand what they mean. But now you're going to really understand what they mean because you're going to explain it to them. And then they're going to say, ooh, where did you learn this? And then you're going to tell them Business 123, Introduction to Investments. See, I help you, you help me. And then, then there's the 12B1 fees, distribution and or service fees. 25 cents, 0.25% of every dollar, 25 cents for every $100 is paid out for the distribution and or the servicing, advertising of the fund. That's the 12B1 fee. Does Coca-Cola have to tell you how much they're spending on advertising? Or Toyota or GM? No. Does the bank have to tell you how much they're spending on advertising of every dollar they make off of you? No. But according to the Investment Company Act of 1940, mutual funds in the prospectus that nobody reads must show you that how much they are charging you to distribute, advertise, service the fund. Interesting. Then the other expenses are, remember we said lights, the electricity, the website, the rent, the accounting. Those are all the other miscellaneous expenses. And we wind up with 1.16%, which means $1.16 out of every $100 you own in the account will be taken out every year for the mutual fund. And that's how the mutual fund makes money. Assets under management. So you don't like that upfront fee. So you go to your broker and you say, well, Ms. Broker, I don't want to pay the upfront fee. No problem. There's always no problem, folks. For you, we have the Class B shares. There's a maximum deferred sales charge. That's the contingent deferred sales charge of 4% in the first year. Second year, 3% to 1%. And after 4 years, you don't pay any back-end charge when you take the money out. You're going to hold on to the mutual fund. It's a long-term investment, right, Mr. and Mrs. John Q. Investor? Oh, yes, Ms. Broker, we're going to hold on to it for the long term. Okay, so you never have to worry about a back-end charge. But notice, the management fees, the annual operating expenses are the same, 0.74%, 74 cents for every $100 you have in the account. But, oops, what happened? The 12B1 fee jumped from 0.25% to 1%. Right, folks, you're going to pay them one way or the other. That money is going now to the brokerage account to pay for the broker because the broker wants to get paid. Now, they don't get all of that. They get some of it. But that's how it works. So they're sneakily stretching out that upfront fee that you would have paid if you had just gone with the A shares. The other expenses are a little higher at 22 cents for every $100, 0.22%. And so every year, and I think in Alliance's case, I think it's 6 years, you pay $1.96 as opposed to $1.16 every year. You see? The annual operating expenses are higher. Right. And then after 6 years, I'm pretty sure with Alliance, they become A shares. So then you get the lower annual operating expenses after that. And so you go to your broker. I don't want to pay an upfront fee, Ms. Broker. I don't know if I want to get out of this in a couple of years, so I don't want to pay a back-end fee. And what did your broker say? No problem. It's always no problem. Sit down, puppy. For you, we have the Class C shares. No upfront fee, no back-end fee. Well, if you take the money out within a year, we're going to charge you 1%. But you're not going to do that. This is a long-term investment, right, Mr. and Mrs. John Q. Investors? Yes, you're right, Ms. Broker. We should leave the money in for at least a year. And the management fees are exactly the same. The manager gets paid no matter what. They get paid 74 cents for every $100. But there's the 12B1 fees, 1%. And I forget how long Alliance is. I forget how long the high 12B1 fee is. I have to go back and check. I know for the next one. I'll tell you what the next one is. And so the other expenses are 18 cents. So now we're looking at $1.92. $1.92 for every $100 that you have in the account. For longer than the Class B share. I know it's longer than the Class B shares. So you go to your broker and you say, Ms. Broker, I don't want to pay upfront fee, I don't want to pay a back-end fee, and I want low annual operating expenses. And Ms. Broker says, no problem. You're getting, you know how to work the system. No, there's always no problem. No problem. Sit down. For you, we have the advisor class. It used to be called the Class F, but Alliance Bernstein, AB, changed the name to advisor class. No upfront fee, no back-end fee. There's the management fee. Well, they get paid the same no matter what. And look at that. No 12B1 fee. Very cool. No 12B1 fee at all. 18 cents for other expenses. And we're looking at 92 cents. 92 cents for every $100, less than every other share class. How's that, Mr. and Mrs. John Q. investors? Is that ring your chimes? Does that sound like something you want? Oh, by the way, we charge you an extra 2% every year. What was that, Ms. Broker? What did you say? We charge you an extra 2% every year in perpetuity, but we're your wealth managers. Do you understand what's going on, folks? And these things are being pushed left, right, and center. And I made mention of the Department of Labor fiduciary rule. Well, the rules basically encourage brokers to use these wealth management fees, guaranteeing that the investors are going to wind up spending more money over time. You know, there's a special place in hell for people who overregulate. There's a special place in hell for people who underregulate too. So, and luckily they're right next to one another and they scream and holler at each other for eternity. But in this case, they really did a bad job. They did a bad job, and there was some talk of somehow mediating in something, but then the demagogues and the Republicans couldn't play nice in the sandbox, and so we're stuck with it for now. We'll see what happens, but it's really, in my humble opinion, it's not in the investor's best interest. Because if they hold on to the money for a significant chunk of time, which is what you should do, it's a long-term investment, you're going to wind up spending more. Figure that one out. Okay, here's another example. This is another fund called the New Economy Fund. And notice, they have the Class A shares, the B shares, the C shares, and then they call it F2. They have F1, F2, F3. They're three different, the same idea, but they're three different types of financial advisor. But notice they've gotten rid of the Class B shares. And I think actually Alliance is getting rid of them, but they haven't gotten rid of them yet. But notice these guys, no more Class B shares. And there's a reason for that. If you're putting $50 a month away, it's not a big deal. But if you have a lot of money, you should not go with the B shares. It's not a good deal. And some brokers were selling the B shares with clients who had a lot of money, which is not right, and so they got rid of them. Good. This mutual fund has higher sales charge. Notice 5.75%. So these guys are a little bit more expensive than the previous one. But notice that their fees are less. 39 cents as opposed to 74 cents. 23 cents as opposed to 25 cents. And then 19 cents, that was about the same. So 81 cents. So these guys are going to charge you less annually. You pay an upfront fee that's a little bit more, 1.5%, but you pay less annually in perpetuity. Are you with me? Yeah, indeed. So which do you like better? No, you have to decide. Now, as we said, the Class B shares are gone, but the Class C shares have no upfront fee. If you take the money out within a year, they're going to hit you with a 1% fee, but you're not going to do that. It's a long-term investment. 39 cents, again, goes to the management company, but there's the 12B1 fee. You see what happened? They jumped the 12B1 fee from 23 cents to $1 for every $100 you have in the account. and that's to pay the brokers, right? That's how the brokers get paid. 23 cents is the other expenses, and then it's $1.62. And then I know these guys are they are 10 years. The Class C shares stay with you for 10 years, and then they go down to close to what the A shares are. The annual operating expenses go down precipitously, almost half. I think about half. Yeah, look, 81 cents, $1.62. They go down about a half after 10 years. So you don't pay it forever, but 10 years is a long time. The Class F shares have no upfront fee, no back-end fee, but there's the 39 cents that goes to the management company. No distribution and or service fees. No. 16 cents, so 47 cents. That's lower than the A shares. That's what I want, Ms. Broker. I want the Class F shares. Don't worry, we're going to charge you 1 or 2% every year for the rest of your life. And we'll send you a bottle of wine on your birthday and take you to the steakhouse. And you'll make us very, very wealthy. By the way, I have no clients personally who have these wrap accounts. I don't think they're in the best interest of the clients. I wouldn't buy them. I don't recommend them. If you wanted to get one with me, I'd say, look, I'll show you the numbers. You're going to wind up spending more. If you want it, that's up to you, but I don't think it's in your best interest. And I don't have any clients to do this, and I'm not going to have it. Okay, you can see that? Okay. But then, I've put myself at odds, basically, with the industry, which the industry as a whole is promoting this fee-based wealth management wrap accounts, and they're making more money off of you. Everybody's happy. Not me. Slide number 29. Here's yet another fund. In fact, this is a famous fund, now infamous, called the Legg Mason Value Trust. Well, actually, it's not even called the Legg Mason Value Trust anymore. They changed the name to Clearbridge Trust. Why? Because they did really, really poorly in the 2008 debacle. This fund was run by a gentleman by the name of Bill Miller. And we'll come back to Mr. Miller when we get to stocks, because he is a legend, now an infamous legend, of how high you can fly and how low you can crash in the industry. And they didn't used to have the Class A shares. They used to just have the Class C shares, which they called the primary class. But they decided that they needed to join the rest of the world and have Class A and C shares. The Class FI are their Class F shares, Financial Investment Advisor, and then they have this institutional class. What's that? Well, let's take a look at the A shares. 5.75%, just like the previous fund. 68 cents going to the management company. 25 cents service charge. 14 cents. So $1.07. So, do you think that's a lot of money to manage? A lot of it, $1.07 for every $100 to manage your money. Well, it's very typical. We've looked at 81 cents, $1.16, $1.07. It's very typical in the mutual fund world for actively managed funds, where they go and knock on the doors of Ford and GM and Toyota and Chrysler and say, okay, how are you guys doing? It's a lot less than what banks and life insurance companies charge you, but banks and life insurance companies don't have to tell you how much they're charging you, do they? No, they're not under the Investment Company Act of 1940, are they? No. So if you ask the bank, how much are you charging me? They'll go, we don't charge you anything. Ha 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 ha. Okay. Here is the primary class, as it was called. Now it's the Class C, and by far this mutual fund has mostly Class C shares. No upfront fee, almost 1%, 0.95, if you take the money out within a year, which you're not going to do. It's a long-term investment. 68 cents to the management company, 95 cents, there's the 12B1 fee, right? 14 cents for other expenses, so $1.77 every year. And this one, they might have changed the rules. I should go back and look. But this one, the 12B1 fees never went down. The Financial Investment Advisor shares have no upfront fee, no back-end fee, 68 cents for the management fee. Well, that's the same, right? 25 cents for the distribution and or service fees, and 22 cents for other expenses. So $1.15. $1.15. Interesting, right? And then remember, your financial advisor is going to add 1 or 2%. Then the institutional class. Well, how do you get them? Do you have to be institutionalized? Well, they have the lowest fees. 68 cents, no upfront fee, no back-end fee. 68 cents, no 12B1 fees, 12 cents. So 12 cents for other expenses, and so 80 cents. Now, why is this mutual fund so infamous? Well, it was run by a name, not anymore, he's retired, but run by a guy named Bill Miller. And for 15 years in a row, he beat the Standard & Poor's 500. That's unheard of. That's I'm not a big sports fan, folks, and sometimes we use analogies to sports, and sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. But you remember Tony Gwynn. Everybody in San Diego loves the memory of Tony Gwynn. Well, he won the batting championship 7 years, I think. I mean, unheard of. Probably never, the competition's so stiff, probably no one will ever do it again. But, unlike Mr. Gwynn, Mr. Miller then became one of the worst money managers. He flew very high for a long time and made his investors very wealthy, and then crashed and burned in the 2008 debacle. And many people in the 2000s would say, well, do you invest with him? Because I would use him as an example and talk about him. And I say, no, I appreciate him. I think, this was before he crashed, right? I respect him, obviously. You can't not respect somebody who's that good. But he uses a very concentrated mutual fund. He would keep about 40, 45 stocks in his mutual fund. Well, folks, that's legal. Remember, they have to have at least 20. But it's not smart, in my humble opinion. A mutual fund is a mutual fund because of diversification. You want to have at least 100, preferably 150 or more, names in your portfolio, so that if one company does poorly, it won't be a big deal. Well, he would keep 40 or 45. And that's great as long as the ones you choose are doing well, but when the ones you choose are not doing well, it's a double-edged sword, right? You live by the sword, you die by the sword. And so Mr. Bill Miller crashed and burned, and they let him stick around till 2012. I was surprised. Usually when you're that bad, they kick you out pretty quickly. But his name was enough to keep him going. So don't feel too sorry for Mr. Miller, okay? Yeah, I'm sure he's done very well for himself. Slide number 30. Now for something completely different. I'm a big Monty Python fan. This is an index fund. This fund does no research. Remember the research analyst with the top hat? Wrong. This one doesn't have them. We'll discuss passive management, as it is called, index investing, much more later on. You or I could run this fund. Why? Because we go look at the list of companies called the Standard & Poor's 500, and there are 500 stocks in that list, and if it's on the list, we buy it, and if it's not on the list, we don't buy it. So you or I could run this fund, assuming we can read. Index funds usually have lower fees, but not always, be careful, and they usually are no load, usually true no load funds. So here is the most famous of them all, the Vanguard Index 500. It wasn't, people say it's the first fund. No, there were people doing indexing just at the same time, but this was the first one that was offered to the public. No upfront fees, no back-end fees. Management fees of only 12%. Wow, that's lower than all the others. Well, they better be. They're not doing anything. They're not going out and knocking on the doors of the companies to see if they're doing well. No, they're just going in there and looking at a list of 500 companies and buying the companies that are on the list and not buying the companies that are not on the list. I mean, you can't get much, easy. It's very cheap to run this fund. They don't have any 12B1 fees. Unless you have $10,000 or less, they'll charge you $20 a year. But if you sign up for electronic delivery, then they'll waive that. 2 cents for other expenses. So this fund is charging you 14 cents for every $100 in the account. Yeah, that's a whole lot less than the other funds. It better be less. Why? Because they're not doing any investigation. They're not doing any research. They're simply looking at a list of stocks and buying that list. We'll discuss passive investing in detail later. Fidelity, which used to be the #1 mutual fund company, was overtaken by Vanguard because Vanguard pioneered low-fee mutual funds. They were able to overtake Fidelity as the #1 mutual fund company. Well, what did Fidelity do? If you can't beat them, right, join them. Fidelity responded by eliminating all sales loads, creating their own index funds, and lowering their fees below Vanguard. Look, 0.015%. A $12 account fee if your account is below $2,000, unless you enroll in automatic purchases. And then 0.075% for other expenses, or 9%. It reminds me of limbo. How low can you go, right? So they say, okay, Vanguard, we'll do the same, but we will go down even lower than you. And an interesting note, they used to call it the Spartan 500. And I don't think people really understood that. I mean, Spartans were sparse, right? That's where we get the name sparse. And they were very abstemious, which is a fancy way of saying cheap and, and no frills. But I think they somehow saw Spartan 500 and Spartan 300, that movie and stuff, and they thought, you know what, we better not call it Spartan. We don't think people figure out what we're doing here. So they just call it the Fidelity 500 Index Fund now, just like Vanguard 5 Index. Okay, so yes. Now, where you have to be careful is they will sneak these index funds into your 401k, and they won't use the Fidelity or the Vanguard. They'll use the Wells Fargo Index Fund or the Nationwide Index Fund. You ever heard of Nationwide on your backside? Who would do something like this? They would sneak their index funds in there with double, triple, 10 times the fees of Fidelity or Vanguard. Who would do that to their employees? Southwestern Community College. And they didn't really have any idea they were doing it. I would talk to the folks in HR and human resources and say, do you understand what they're doing? And they go, no. Finally, one of the people there took this class, Business 123, and she said, we're being screwed. I said, yes, we're being screwed. And this is what you got to, this is why you're going to be so cool, folks. This is why you're going to, the jerk up there in front of you, with the 3-piece suit is going to tell you how wonderful your 401k is, and you're going to say, wait a minute, how come we got this Nationwide Index Fund with 83 cents on every $100 when Vanguard's charging 12 cents and Fidelity's charging 9 cents? What's going on? And he's going to go, he's going to be skunked, and that's when he should just leave. But he won't, because he's making too much money. Slide number 32. So now, every prospectus is supposed to show you how much it will cost you over 1, 3, 5, and 10 years. So we go back to the AB, AllianceBernstein Large Cap Growth Fund, and we find that after 1 year, the A shares cost the most. Well, of course, you paid the upfront fee. And the B and the C shares are less, and then the advisor class, that looks really good. We'll come back to that later. After 3 years, the B and the C are catching up. After 5 years, they've caught up, and then after 10 years, who was the cheapest over the long term? The A shares. And you see, this is why I still believe the A shares are the best deal. Assuming you need the help of a financial advisor, or these are just the funds that you want, the A shares over the long term are the best deal. Now, of course, if you move your funds from mutual fund to mutual fund every few years outside the family, then yeah, the A shares are going to kill you because of that upfront fee. But you're not going to do that. Mutual funds are long-term investments. Now, it looks as though the advisor class shares are the best deal, right? Huh? Sure? Wrong. Adding the advisor's typical fee of 1 to 2% per year would add an additional $1,200 to $2,400 to the total cost. So over the long term, what's the best deal? In my humble opinion, the A shares. And this is where I run contrary to what the Department of Labor is trying to do. They want people to go with the advisor class shares. And I don't know why, probably because somebody from the industry snuck into the Department of Labor and is a little mole and changed the regulations such that it looks, it makes it ooh, and they wrap themselves in the flag and they say we're doing this for your own good. This is in your best interest. It's not in your best interest. Assuming you're going to be there for the long term, it's going to cost you more. But they'll send you a bottle of wine on your birthday and take you to the golf course or the steakhouse, and you'll be happy. Slide number 33, the Legg Mason Value Trust. You see, the Class A shares, there are not that many of them out there, so let's just ignore them. The Class C shares of this no-load fund wind up costing you more than the Class A shares. And the financial intermediary class seems to be a better deal, but again, that doesn't include the advisor's annual fee. So what about the institutional class? How do I get them? Well, for starters, are you a large pension fund, a university endowment, or a tax-exempt charity? Oh, and by the way, do you have at least $1 million to invest with us? Get out of here. We don't want to see you. Now, look at the Index 500. The fees for passively managed index funds will almost always be less than actively managed funds. They better be, because they're not doing anything. But notice a little asterisk here if you're looking on the screen. Careful, some 401k plans will have high-fee index funds. Why would they do that? Because they can, and they assume that people don't understand how they're being screwed. But you, dear students, are going to be the mole. You're going to be the ringer. You're going to be the assassin who shows them for the jerks that they... I gotta watch my blood pressure here. I'm serious, folks. I apologize on behalf of my industry. Remember, we said nothing's perfect. And in this case, this is one of those situations where people are just being reamed. And what are you going to do? You fight the good fight, and hopefully enough people will say this is wrong, and it'll change. Because look, $14, $45, $79, $179 over 10 years. Vanguard also has this Admiral class. Well, now they've all added this, where if you put in $100,000, then the fees even went lower. But in the fall of 2010, they lowered the minimum to $10,000. Cool. Now, do you remember the exchange-traded funds? Right? We talked about those. They often have lower fees than the index fund. Vanguard has an ETF that tracks the total U.S. stock market that has an expense ratio of 0.04, 4 cents. And you are in the assignment for Chapter 4 going to investigate funds that are similar. You're going to investigate the funds that are in the TSP, the Thrift Savings Plan. And you'll see that their expense ratios are even less. How low can you go? Slide 35. Now, we talked about the maximum sales charge. We said that for the New Economy Fund and for the Legg Mason Fund, which is now called ClearBridge, you paid a 5.75% sales charge. Well, that's the maximum. As soon as your account hits $25,000 or you invest $25,000, it goes down to 5%. 4.5% is what you get if you invest between $50,000 and $100,000. When your account hits $100,000, it goes to 3.5%. Your account hits $250,000, it goes down to 2.5%. 500,000, 2, 700,000, 1.5, until finally, when your account hits $1 million or you invest $1 million, combination of thereof, you pay no sales charge and you get the lower annual operating expenses. Do you think the industry likes rich people? Yes, they do. The industry loves very wealthy people. And for this reason alone, the A shares are very cool because you're going to have $1 million in there eventually, especially if you're young. Trust me. So, in the industry, as a person would get closer to the sales breakpoint, some brokers failed to inform their clients of this feature. Instead, as the clients approached the breakpoint, they would advise them to start another fund. What? You're not serious, are you? Yes. When I first heard this, I could not believe it. I thought, no broker would. Oh, I guess so. Because they want to keep the highest commission for them. And now if you do this, now the SEC says, if you do this and we catch you, we're not only going to fine you, we might kick you out of the industry, plus you're going to pay back the client what they deserve. And we're going to find out we're going to go through all your other clients and see if you did this, and you're going to pay them back. So thankfully for that, because that's just a horrible thing to do to your clients, in my humble opinion. Slide 36. Here is the contingent deferred sales charge that we talked about with the Class B shares. For the large cap growth fund, the Alliance Bernstein AB, the first year, if you take the money out, 4%, year number 2, 3, year number 3, 2, year number 4, 1%. After 4 years, you pay no back-end fee, but then I think you have to wait until 6 years before the service, the 12B1 fee goes down to 0.25%, like the A shares. This is typical in the life insurance world with what are called annuities. They call it a surrender charge, but they typically start at 25% or 20%, and they take 20 years or more to go down. So whatever we say bad about the mutual fund companies, remember that the life insurance companies are infinitely more rotten, in my humble opinion. And don't forget, I also have a life insurance. I have my life insurance and property and casualty license, so I can say true things about my fellow insurance agents. And if they want to sue me, I would be so happy for them to sue me, because that means you go to discovery, and that means we find out that they really are doing these things. And so what I said is true, and you can't sue me. You can sue me. I can sue you back. You won't win. Slide number 37. Okay. Oh boy. All right. So now, are you exhausted? Are you confused? Are your mind stretched out? You now know well, not really, because there's a whole lot of other class shares, but these are the main categories. And so now that you've gone through all the different fees and expenses and share classes, I'm going to give you $10,000 10 years ago. How's that for a deal? And I'm going to ask you, which one would you choose? The AB Large Cap Growth Fund, remember we think the Class A shares are the best deal. The New Economy Fund, the Class A shares. The Legg Mason Value Trust, the Class C shares, which were called the primary class. Or the Abstemious, which is a nice way of saying cheap, inexpensive. Use it with your friends. Abstemious. It's just a great word. Vanguard Index 500. So which one you choose? Huh? And in the face-to-face class, we would then have people raise our A, B, C, D cards we have, but we don't have that for the online. And so you choose, right? And because now we're going there, you ready? Bingo! How'd you do? Right? Fees are important, folks, but they don't tell you the whole story. When comparing mutual funds, you must look at many attributes, not the least of which are the rates of return, preferably over longer periods of time. And I will tell you right off the bat, I don't like 10 years. I like 20, 30, 50 years. I want to know how well you've done over decades. Yeah, because that's the way I am with regard to mutual funds. I want to see how well you've done through many cycles of the business world. And so here we see that the index fund did pretty good, 7.08%, and almost doubled. And that's exactly what you would get when you get 7% after 10 years. It about doubles. You divide 7 into 72, right? You get 7.2 years to double. The index 500 did a little better. Well, why is that? Well, of course, right. The index 500 is taking 14 cents out of every dollar, right? So, no, out of every $100. I'm sorry, 14 cents out of every $100, 0.14 cents out of every dollar. And so the index fund won't match the index, but it'll come very close. Now, look at the Alliance Growth Fund, right? The Alliance Large Cap Growth Fund, AB. This is a very well-run fund, folks. They have done very well for many years. And they were able to do 10%. Actually, they did 10.61%, but you have to remember you took out that 5.75% sales commission. So on the money that you invested, it's actually 10.13. At net asset value, if you had put in if you had put in $1 million, you'd actually would have gotten more, 10.61% per year. And so $26,000, that's a significant chunk of change, more than 19.8. The New Economy Fund, yeah, they did pretty well, right? Because remember, you paid that upfront fee, and you got you paid your broker basically for their help and their ongoing help. Your broker is not going to go away unless they disappear some reason. They're going to help you, and you actually did a little bit better than the S&P 500. But what if you went with Bill Miller right before he crashed and burned? 1.57%. Yes. Now, 10 years ago, dear students, this was 37,000. That's how well he had done over 10 years, and he had done even better over 15. And so when people would ask me, well, why don't you obviously just go with Mr. Bill Miller? And I said, no, I don't think it's a good idea. I like diversification. And I'm glad I didn't, because look at how badly he did. And now he's gone, and I feel sorry for the people who are running the fund now, because now they have to live down. They have to somehow live down the what he had done to it. So an index fund, the takeaway, won't beat the index, but it'll basically give you the index a little bit less than the index. Whereas actively managed funds might do better, they might do much better, they might do much worse than the index. Oh well. Now, checking for understanding. You got your A, B, C, D cards? No, you don't, because you're not in the face-to-face class. But this is what we would do in the face-to-face class. Those shares, what are these shares that do not have an upfront fee? Instead, they assess a decreasing back-end load if you withdraw your money within 6 years. The annual operating expense is higher courtesy of the 12B1 fees. So back-end, right, back-end means B shares. And they normally revert to A shares after 6, 8 years. So remember that contingent deferred sales charge, that decreasing back-end load. B, Class B shares. And as we said, these are disappearing. The New Economy Fund got rid of them. I think AB, Large Cap Growth Fund, I think Alliance Bernstein is getting rid of them too. So New Economy, they already got rid of them. That's American funds. They've already gotten rid of them. Slide 39. These shares do not have an upfront fee and only a 1% back-end fee if redeemed with 1 year. The advisor called them no load, but you notice that their annual operating expense is higher than other share classes. Again, courtesy of those ubiquitous 12B1 fees. Are these the A shares, B shares, C shares, or F or I? No upfront fee, no back-end fee, as long as you don't take the money out within a year, but higher annual operating expenses. Those are the C shares. And again, after 10 years or so, the share annual operating expense will go down. They'll become cheaper after a certain amount of years. Some don't. That Legg Mason, maybe they changed that. I got to go back and look at the prospectus. And our last slide. Your financial advisor tells you that these shares have no sales fee and a very low annual operating expense. She mumbles something about wealth management. These are the A, B, C, or the F or I shares, or FI shares, or advisor shares. Right. These are the F or I shares. She also did her best not to explain to you that her brokerage firm will charge you an extra 2% each year. And so I have a little story. Just hold on with me. I have a client. Well, actually, I don't have her anymore. She's retired and has gone through her money. But she had a group at her church showing her some investments. And she was going to decide between yours truly and this group for the investment. And it was at her church, and she knew I was a godless communist liberal. And they were going to charge her 2% a year to manage the fund. But they don't manage the fund. The mutual fund companies do that. And I explained to her what was going on and how this company I was showing her was going to charge her, this much less. And she went back to them, and when she explained that she understood that they were charging her 2%, bingo, it went to 1%. No questions asked. Oh, we'll drop it to 1%. And so she went with them because they were her church, and she felt comfortable with the church-growing folks. And how do you compete with that, right? Well, I want to tell you, folks, anybody who raises the Christian flag or religious flag in the financial industry world is really doing you a disservice. Have you heard, render unto God that which is God, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar? Folks, this is Caesar. This financial, the investment world, this is Caesar. So be careful, because what I've noticed is they don't necessarily give you the best deal when they're raising the flag of religion. And I think that's just typical. You have to be careful. People use the flag, they use the cross as a way to hide what are not necessarily in your best interest, items that are not necessarily in your best interest. So what are you going to do? You're going to go back over this, right? Twice. Because this is confusing, folks. And we just went through 4 different share classes. There are many more, but they're all basically similar. They're all basically archetypal riffs, so to speak, to use a musical term. Basically variations on a theme, another musical term. And so you need to know these, because not only am I going to ask you on the test, you also need to know these because you are now in a very important position. You are the expert. You're the guru for your friends, family, and coworkers. And we don't want you to let them down. We want you to be able to sniff out these horrible extraneous fees that the financial advisors and the mutual fund companies can tack on, because we want you to be awesome, and you will be. And then don't forget to tell them where you learned it. Okay, now in our next presentation, we got another stretch your brain presentation, because we're going to try to get our arms around the industry and all the different types of mutual funds. And again, we're just going to scratch the surface, but we will have gone through the many important categories. And then, again, there are more variations on the theme. So are you excited, folks? Are you learning and getting an education? I hope so. We value your feedback. We want this to be the best class you have ever taken. So if there's something that's not working for you, contact me. We will work to make it right. Be awesome, study hard, bring honor and glory to Southwestern College, to your family, friends, and coworkers, and it sounds like an advertisement, doesn't it? See you in our next presentation.